Ready, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome to the after show on the Mike Graham Show. I am, of course, Mike Graham. We've just finished an incredible 7 to 9 breakfast show that we do every single weekday morning, 7 a.m. You don't want to miss it from the start. We finished up with Ralph Schulhammer at 9. Just before that, talking about Greenland and what's going on there. I don't know what the state of the roads are in Greenland, but if anybody's going to invade it, you might want to find out. We're going to talk about the state of the roads in this country now, because the after show is what we do on Substack every single weekday after 9 o'clock, after we've finished the main show, and we talk to an expert in any number of different disciplines. Today, I'm delighted to say, we're going to speak to a man by the name of Mr. Pothole, who is on Twitter as Mr. Pothole UK, of course. His real name is Mark. Mark, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the after show.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolute pleasure as well. Now, we decided this would be a good idea because last week we were fortunate enough to celebrate, or perhaps not celebrate, National Pothole Day. I don't know who designated it National Pothole Day. I think it was last
Me,
Thursday.
Mike,
Was
me.
it you? Okay, good. Tell us why we've got National Pothole Day. Tell us what happens on National Pothole Day.
Right, I set it up because I thought there's so much media attention. I mean, it used to be local newspaper. It's become a national story, actually international, because I've done filming with French television and other media from Spain and all sorts. So we've become an international embarrassment state of our roads. But I originally set it up just to highlight the problems with our roads and really get people engaged to put pressure on councils, report potholes and highlight it. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. The first year that I did it, it obviously got some sort of gravitas because even the government sent out ministers on National Pothole Day to stand by potholes. So, and I had the then Highways Agency, or Highways England as it was at that time, asking me how many potholes I expected them to get reported on that day.
Yeah. And I mean, it has definitely raised the profile of potholes, because I know from doing the job that I've been doing for decades now, one of the things that I started doing when I first had a radio show was talking about things like the state of the roads and things that actually affect ordinary people. You know, it's all very well when you get the BBC banging on about, you know, the ins and outs of diplomacy in Greenland and whether the Iranian, regime is about to fall. But most people, as they go about their day-to-day business, worry about what schools their kids are going to, how safe the streets are, whether or not they can drive from point A to point B without wrecking their car. You know, these are all issues that people care about. And I remember they used to make fun of me when I first started a show in Scotland. And I can't remember the first time I spoke to you. It might have been then, back in the day, when I was working for Talk 107, sort of 2006, 2007. And we started suddenly talking about potholes and how dangerous they were and how much damage they caused to cars and how much they cost the economy.
Yeah, you're right, Mike. I mean, I did an interview from the top of a tank, remember once with you
Yes.
when I was going through central London. So I really heightened that. The orange tank sort of captured imagination.
Yeah.
Videos and pictures of that went all over the world, and we had tourists climbing all over the tank when we sort of finished our stunt. So you're right. I mean, there's a serious side because, you know, it's reported one cyclist a week's killed or seriously injured as a result of potholes, and over 70 motorcyclists are killed or seriously injured as a result of badly maintained roads. Then there's the economic cost because, you know, motorists get screwed by government in terms of any way they can in terms of a cash cow.
Yeah.
I mean, I estimate it's over £50 billion in total take from motorists. That's, fuel duty, VAT on fuel duty, road fund licence, also VAT on services, maintenance, repairs. And because every time you damage a tyre at £200, the government get 20% of that, don't they?
Well, of course they do, yeah, with the old VAT. They get more than that. They get 20% presumably of the bill that you also get from the people who fixed it. And it's not just the tyre you're paying for, it's the service, the labour, any insurance that you pay on. You know, so there's an awful lot of money being collected. When was it that Keir Starmer went and talked to somebody at Halfords about this? Do you remember? It was sometime last year, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm fed up with governments. It's all grandstanding and gimmicks. I mean, they talk about these. I mean, Lillian Greenwood was the chair of a select committee when I did work with them, and I submitted my evidence. She was excellent select committee chair. When she became the roads minister, I had some hope or faith that perhaps we would see some real change in terms of government, in terms of understanding the problem. And unfortunately, I was sorely let down because they're very good at talking about it. They get in power and suddenly the blob stops them.
Yes, and they're not interested anymore in if there's nothing in it for them. And I mean, the problem, I suppose, for the Labour government is that ideologically they're not particularly wedded to the roads, are they? I mean, we saw last week they're going to put in 45 billion quid, although nobody really cares because it probably won't happen, for the Northern Powerhouse Rail sort of network. They're talking about spending money that's already been promised years and years ago by the Tories to include better rail travel between places like Leeds and Manchester, Leeds and Newcastle, you know, all of that. But listening to people who know about this stuff, they say not only probably will it never happen, but even if it does happen, the first chance you'll get to ride on a train will be about 2050, you know. And so they love talking about trains. They love talking about alternative means of travel like cycling and walking. They don't really like cars at all, do they?
Doesn't seem to be, but I mean, living in a sort of a market town, but around obviously the rural area where my children live and friends and stuff, you are reliant upon your car. Not, you know, central London, fine, public transport, totally agree with it,
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. But I mean, when you live in a rural area, or you have to commute, or people have to travel to their job, at the end of the day, the road network in the UK is the blood supply for our economy, and it's estimated that badly maintained roads are costing the UK economy £14.4 billion a year. My argument about the extra £3 billion on resurfacing that's got to be index linked year on year, within 10 years, you would halve that. You know, the economics suggest that you have to invest to save. You can't do short-termism with a network. I mean, the network's probably valued at around £600 billion. I mean, economically, argument, you should be spending around 1% of the value of the asset each year maintaining it. I mean, these are common sense, practical things that are out there, and government just don't really understand. I mean, I don't trust them to do anything. I mean, I wouldn't trust Keir Starmer to in a brewery to have a good drink up.
No, absolutely. You can probably put it as you would like to put it on this particular channel, because here we are now doing a Substack which is going out to dedicated to subscribers. By the way, if you are listening right now live on the Substack, do tell some other people to join in as well, because you get all sorts of great things. I put out a tweet earlier on today, Mark, to say that you were joining us for the after show on Substack. And I've got a couple of questions in. One from Kev, who says, shows a picture, which I think you've seen, of a pothole in the middle of the road. It looks as though, I mean, it's a typical British road scene, really, because on the front end of the pothole, which looks about probably 2 inches deep, maybe 3, there's a big patch which has been made of tarmac, which has covered obviously a slightly bigger space. Behind the pothole, there's yet another big patch of tarmac. To the right of that patch, there's yet another pothole, and straight ahead of it is another pothole that's been filled in, having had a white mark put around it. But it all just looks terrible. And what he says is a typical road here in my town in South Staffordshire. This is one of the better ones. I would be interested in hearing your guest views on the impact of heavy electric vehicles and vans that side roads were never built for. And this is something I've often raised because, you know, particularly in major cities, you've got electric buses now, you've got all these electric vans delivering supermarket food, they're all electric, you know, so they must be really heavy, aside from all the electric cars that are doing damage to the roads. I mean, has anyone ever done a study as to how damaging these electric vehicles, these very heavy electric vehicles actually are?
I mean, there has been some sort of minor studies. I mean, longer term, I mean, you've got to look at our roads were failing before the electric vehicles. All it is, it's just adding to the load, because apart from the weight, the torque from the electric wheels, because of the way electric motors work, puts down more pressure on the road surface. Well, if the road was in good condition, it wouldn't have the effect it is having on poorly maintained roads. So, I mean, and obviously the heavier vehicle, because if you look at heavy goods vehicles, they're equivalent to thousands of axles of a car. So it does have some impact. But if the road was in good condition, it'd have less impact on that basis. So it's just adding to the situation. And in that photograph, you've got a perfect example of a poor quality pothole repair. I mean, some white markings around there in infill. And I think Kev, the red, said about why are they failing. Well, even if you did a good quality repair, in a road surface that's the end of its life and it's failing, it will either the pothole repair will fail, or close by the edge of it, it will start failing. I mean, I see examples where they don't cut out properly, they don't clean it out properly, they don't tack coat it, they use the wrong grade materials, they use footway grade materials in the carriageway, so it's not going to last. Compaction's another problem. You'll see them all out there with a whacker plate, which is like a small version of, say, let's say like a lawnmower, but it's got a plate underneath it, that sort of size. They're designed for footpaths and driveways. They're not designed for a carriageway. Unless you've got a vibrating roller, then you won't get the compaction, and therefore it's going to fail. If they don't seal the edges, if they don't overband it. So I see all those problems. In fact, I worked with Lantra, a training organisation, and came up with the only pothole training course that there is. And that's really, I think, every operative who works on our road should have to go through that training course. But then that creates other problems, because then they might say to their lords and masters, their contractors or every direct, they want the proper kit to do the proper job, because if they know what they need to do the job properly, then that puts it up the line, and then there becomes all sorts of issue in terms of weight of vehicles and carrying equipment. Well, if you're tendering for works and you should be doing it at the right specification, that's your problem. You should have the correct equipment, correct materials, and that training course would improve the quality of our repairs.
Yeah, and obviously some parts of Britain are better than others. I've got this from Cam's Powder, who says, I've been in Cumbria for the weekend. Apart from the stunning views, the thing I noticed most about Cumbria is there are hardly any potholes in the roads, made driving on the country roads an absolute delight. Is that an issue of not so much traffic, perhaps, or what?
Well, partly, but Cumbria got, I think, rated red on the Department of Transport's pothole traffic light system that they published last week. I mean, there's all sorts of issues with that. I think it's a great step forward for transparency, but I think the questions they sent out in its self-assessment wrote with its interpretation, because we've got places like Essex that have got green. Well, I know because I did an FOI just over a year ago that they need £1 billion to bring their roads up to a good standard. So it's a start of things, but I think a number of councils have appealed. But you're quite right. I mean, but the main roads tend to be looked after more because they get more of a priority. I mean, Cumbria gets some terrible weather, so it is a difficult situation. And the southwest have real problems, Devon and Cornwall. And Devon's got the most, I think it got about 9,000 miles of road. They've got the most roads in the country. Right. There are some really good people out there trying to do a really good job, Mike. It's not being a downer on the councils and contractors, but it's endemic. 80% of this is about funding. After that is training, quality of repairs, materials, good old-fashioned supervision. I did an interview last week and said, really, as a contractor, apart from the KPIs that they produce, you should be monitoring the KPIs, because they're only going to tell you what they want to tell you. When I used to look after contracts, multi-million-pound contracts in central London for gas, including reinstatement, if a contractor weren't up to my expectations, I used to pull them in for a bloody good bollocking.
Yeah, I mean, that's what used to happen, didn't it, in all parts of life? But, a bloody good bollocking is quite hard to find these days. If you start giving people a bloody good bollocking, you find yourself at the wrong end of an employment tribunal usually, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I call it coaching and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely right. Coaching and feedback, very true. Now, I've had a couple of interesting things drawn to my attention. As we're only 2 weeks into January, effectively. But there was a story run on ITV's website the other day. More than 50 vehicles have been damaged by a huge pothole on the A421 in Buckingham, and that's in one day. Motorists who struck the hole on the Tingewick bypass heading west, just past the junction for Barton, were left with burst tyres, damaged wheels, and suspension. Dozens of cars had to be abandoned at the side of the road, and those that managed to get to local services had to wait to get their tyres repaired, and some had to be towed away. I mean, that's an extraordinary state of affairs. And there's another one in Oxford, right? Residents of Wilcote near Charlbury in Oxfordshire said damage done on the single-track Bridewell Lane has been puncturing cars and costing vehicle owners more than £300 in repairs each time. One resident described this particular pothole as at least 66 feet long and 7.4 inches deep. I mean, that's not a pothole, that's a bleeding crater, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, the Tinswick one I know quite well because it's not far from me, and that there's a history of failure of that road. And I did actually message ITV to say that if the people are looking to make a claim, I sent them some screenshots to show them that there's a history of there, to say that the council will try and get out of paying for it, saying that they didn't know about it. But there's a case in case law. They should have reasonably known that there was likely to be a defect or
Yes.
failure. So they've got some sort of recourse. And in fact, on that same road over Christmas, I had a friend of mine contact me. 2 tyres they did, and they weren't the only vehicle that did so. And I got them to ring the police to report it to get an immediate repair. But obviously, they'd done a quick repair. Then what they should have been down there is assessing what they needed to do before there was other situations, because it's 70 mile an hour. I know the road. I used it before many times. So unfortunately, Mike, I've come to the conclusion I've got no faith in any political party at the moment doing anything about the current situation with the backlog of our road maintenance. The best thing motorists can do is look at protecting themselves with a pothole protection insurance, and there's a couple of companies that have recently come sort of set up to do cover motorists, so it doesn't affect your main insurance.
Right. Okay, so tell us more about that. Is that something that you would recommend that people do then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do it myself, Mike. So that's the proof is in the pudding. I mean, example, one of them, it's £45 for the year, so it's 87 pence a week, which that buys nothing nowadays. But it covers you up to £2,000 worth of damage, and you pay a £50 excess rather than on your main insurance, which could be a lot higher. It doesn't affect your main insurance, and if they win the money back from the council, you get your £50 excess back. I mean, at least you can quantify and protect yourself as much as possible, because our roads aren't going to get any better.
No, they're really not. I mean, looking at your statistics for National Pothole Day last week, carriage maintenance backlog in the year 2000 was 3.75 billion. It's increased to 17 billion in 2025, which is an average increase of 530 million pounds a year. Over the last 5 years, the backlog grows from 11 billion in 2020 to 17 billion in 2025, an increase in size of 1.2 billion pounds per annum. I mean, it's a massive amount of money, isn't it? And when you've got local councils pleading poverty, saying, you know, oh, we haven't really got enough money to do this, that, or the other. And you also learn, by the way, that of those councils that have now banished elections and who are not actually going to allow elections to take place, it turns out they have increased their council tax, you know, by a ludicrous amount of money, you know, £260 million, I think, something like that, basically. So they haven't got money for this, have they? Where are they going to find it?
Yeah, I mean, that increase going up to the 1.2 billion on average over that period shows the increased failure of the road network. It's deteriorating at a sort of an alarming rate, and it's going to get worse because, you know, the network, the wearing surface on the road generally lasts around 20 years. Most of our roads are 70 years plus, so it doesn't take a lot of working out of while our network's failing. And as I said, government need to invest because they're pulling in tens of billions of pounds from motorists. And it makes sense for the economy, as I said, and went into the figures there. Councils, I do have a little bit of sympathy for councils because, I mean, they have really got a big demand on them through social care and all those costs as well. And some of those are reliant now on central government money for roads. They haven't got much in their own coffers, as it were. But on the other hand, do they do as good a job as they could do? No. A lot of them really, they need to completely look at how they operate. Some of them now are going away from doing the odd repair. They're doing a number of repairs in an area, which is far better, and doing more permanent repairs. There's some really good techniques out there. I mean, JCB Pro is a brilliant bit of kit. The lads in Stoke-on-Trent did 7 years' work in 12 months with it. And to be fair, the council, it became a bit of an embarrassment. They were sort of trying to stop the lads doing so much work. There's another system called Roadmender that's really, really useful. It's being used out there. So I've looked at every sort of technique. There's thermal repairs. So, you know, if you use those techniques, you can make some difference, but you're never going to stop the problem unless you resurface our roads, because they're all failing. And I just cannot see at the moment any light at the end of the tunnel. All my recommendations in the Fill in the Gap Transport Select Committee report still stand, and we need that investment, Mike.
Yeah. And in terms of, say, the consumer, if you're thinking about buying a new car, or if, God forbid, you can actually afford to do that, you're thinking about just maybe putting some better tyres on your car. Are there better, and without, I mean, I'm not asking you to name particular makes of tyre, but are there particular types of tyre that you would recommend to people if, in fact, I don't know, it turns out that they need to have more resilient tyres in an area where there's a lot of potholes?
I mean, low-profile tyres are so susceptible to damage, Mike.
Yeah.
And also,
those are the ones with the big sort of hubcaps, aren't they?
yeah, and run flat tyres can be more susceptible as well.
Oh, really?
Because they're quite rigid. Yeah. And so you need a decent tyre. The other thing is make sure they're inflated correctly when you're using them. If you come to a pothole, don't brake. Try and keep your wheel as straight as possible, because if you turn or deviate or brake, you increase the load on the tyre at the point you have damage there. Because I've done some work with Tyre Safe on that, and that's the best thing you can do. Obviously, if you can do it at a slower speed, fine, but it's not always possible.
Yeah.
People are practicing slalom. I think some of our drivers could be doing skiing in the Olympics because the amount of slalom we're doing. But you have to be careful with that, because you can cause another hazard. And sometimes you can't avoid it because oncoming traffic. And if they're full of water, particularly this time of year, they hide just how bad they can be below the road.
Well, that's the trouble. I mean, from my own experience, I mean, usually if I hit a pothole, it's one I haven't seen. I mean, on roads that I drive on a regular basis, I kind of know where there's a bit of an uneven surface, you can avoid it. But when I tend to hit a pothole, it's usually because it's either night time and it's on a road I'm not familiar with, and it's too late. I've already hit it before I've realised what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is people are now getting to driving that they're looking for potholes rather than further down the road. I was always taught to drive, you look down the road to anticipate a hazard or the driving. So, the distances you're looking now is much closer to the vehicle. And even I can get caught out, although reading the road, I can tend to have a rough idea where they're likely to be, particularly on rural roads in that section where it sort of bleeds into the grass verge, on bends where people brake a lot. They're always close in that situation. But yeah, even in myself, I have to be careful, because on a road I don't know, they can catch you out.
Exactly right. One final question for you. Pooch has asked this one. If you do paint a pothole with a Union Jack or a more simple St George's flag, will it actually get cleaned up quicker?
Well, it did initially, but then some of the councils just removed the paint. I mean, it's a bit like when someone drawed phalluses around potholes. It got the desired response, but now they tend to paint those out because of the situation. But can you imagine? I did some work with AI, because the government's great at saying about AI. Well, I did some work with Stan the app, which is an app you can download on your phone. You can do some surveying yourself. Myself and some of my followers cover 10% of the total road network in the UK.
Yes.
A good sample. Based upon that, there's about 11 million defects on our roads. So that's not only potholes, it's cracking, crazing. Delamination is where it loses the wearing surface that affects your grip values and things like that. But can you imagine a satellite picture if everybody painted across the St George or a Union Jack in the potholes in the UK? I'd love to get Elon Musk's equipment to actually photograph it, and we could publish it. Perhaps we should try AI to generate one.
We should, absolutely right. And finally, I mean, if you do report a pothole, the law says that if it's been reported and then somebody goes into it, 24 hours later, there's a liability from the council.
They get out of it using Section 58 of the Highways Act that says basically if they didn't know about it, or if they knew about it and it was within their repair schedule time. So if they said they're going to repair it within 28 days and you hit it on day 10, they would use that as a defence to get out of paying out for it. And the other thing is they set their own timescales. Also, they set the intervention criteria, and that can be different across the country from council to council.
Yeah.
That's why the best thing I could advise motorists at the moment, when I've got and friends and family, is to look at this insurance, Mike. And I think maybe later in the year, when things become a bit clearer, we can have a discussion about how that works and the protection it will give.
Absolutely. Brilliant. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Mark, how do they do that?
Well, I'm on X as Mr. Pothole UK. I'm also on Facebook as Mr. Pothole. I'm not campaigning as much as I used to, Mike. As you know, I sort of retired, but I'm not gone away. I didn't want government to think I've gone away completely. I'm still watching. I'm still making comments. But where it's to go all over the country and help parish councils and groups like that, I'm not able to do that anymore. But I still do. I still think I have a role to play to be like Jiminy Cricket, the conscience for government.
Yeah, absolutely right. We've got to keep them all, try and keep them honest. It's not easy. Mark Morell, a.k.a. Mr. Pothole, brilliant to see you. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. We'll be back with more on Substack tomorrow with yet another after show. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, look out for all the Substack extra content that we do. Look out for all of the shows that we do as well, Plank of the Week. And of course, remember, even though there's an awful lot of it about, do not be a plank.
Remember, despite all of the others out there, it's always the others. Don't be a plank.